Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today is May 8th, 2025. That's right. We didn't miss up the year. May 8th, 2025. Welcome to MSP Initiative, MSP Live. This is our once a week podcast normally that we do. And welcome if you are new. And for everybody else that keeps following us on all the handles and the podcatchers and the YouTube and all that good stuff. Thanks for checking in. Try and keep it informative, guys. MSPinitiative.com. That's where we kind of park all the stuff that we do here. We have some in-person things coming up in June next month. We have an event in Dublin. So if you're going to DattoCon Dublin or you just happen to be in the area, come on by. We're doing an MSP community block party over there. And then we also are doing one in Tampa in conjunction with the Flow conference, which along with our friends Roost and several others. So if you're headed down there or you happen to be in the area, you're an MSP, come on by. It's a community event for you. All of that out of the way. Welcome, first time on the show, Ben Greiner.
Greiner, yes, he did
There
it.
we go. I didn't mess it up. So Ben is first time we ask anybody to join. We always want you to walk down history lane, give us a little bit of background on yourself and how you made it into technology land, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thanks for having me on. And you mentioned Dublin. Are you going to be in the Dublin event?
I'm going. I'm
Oh,
gonna
okay.
bring this green shirt with me. You think it'll fit
Yeah,
in?
that sounds awesome. So yeah, my history is and I think when did you get started, George? You're
That's a great question. I feel like I never did this part myself on any one of these sessions. Big picture, I started my IT computer repair networking company back in 2000, 2001.
okay.
Still in school at the time. And, obviously, learned the hard way, as most people in the Northeast,
Yeah.
especially in Philadelphia area do. Didn't run into, some of the familiar names in the industry like, ConnectWise and all these other guys until like kind of mid to late 2011, right? Like
Hmm.
started getting spammed by all of them in 2010, 2009, didn't buy anything until 2011, and then kind of went headfirst into that, pond, right? When we finally discovered that there's an actual community out there. And like I would say phase two, right? So like 2000s was phase one for me. Phase two was
Hmm.
the 2010s, right? That's where it gets a bit more interesting. And then let's just say phase three, post-pandemic, right? Let's just use that as a
Right.
marker in history. So if I were to cut all, three levels of my story, like that's my journey so far.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I have a similar journey. Mine started only slightly earlier in the late 90s, 98. I was here in Chicago working at a small ad agency and had a lot of experience in pre-press and printing and the creative industry. And I was drawn to technology. Everyone in the field was using Apple at the time. So I said, I'm going to go out here in Chicago and help creatives with their workflow issues. That was my plan. So open up the doors of a company called Forget Computers. It was Forget Computers, Get Creative. That was the slogan.
I like it,
And
actually.
yeah, and started picking up a lot of creative design agencies, small ad agencies, photographers. Everyone at that time was really struggling to make that transition to desktop publishing or pre-press, going all electronic.
I'm thinking Apple, like I'm thinking like when I was pre 2000 school, post 2000 school. Like when I think Apple, I just think about the screens with the color back.
Yeah.
Like, I mean,
Well,
Apple's always been pretty deep in the education front, but that's what I think. Like around that time, that's what I remember.
yeah. And I remember in the late night when I started, Apple was really predicted to go out of business. This was this
Right.
was Steve Jobs had just come back. No one thought he could save the company. Everyone thought they were doomed. And I wasn't sure if they were doomed or not, but I knew, the creative community was going to still be there and they would still have to use tools and technology. So that was really my focus. But once I got in there, my vision of helping people with their workflow was quickly replaced by getting their computer to even work and helping them with technology. And if you remember, George, back in the late or early 2000s when you started, but you were around late 90s, I'm sure. You just sat down at a computer, at least on the Mac. You just sat down, turned it on, and started working. There's no login. There's very few were networked. Like this was early days, right? And even in the early 2000s, when I was helping companies, and I would also help internal IT teams with some of the big companies here in Chicago. I remember going into an operation where they had all Windows machines, all networked. They had their creatives off in the corner, and their creatives were not allowed to connect to the local network because they were Macs. It wasn't allowed. They didn't like Apple Talk. It was too chatty. They wouldn't allow it. And so they had to do the old dial-up modem whenever they needed to send a file to the printer. But anyway, so
I mean, listen, I remember this time well. Granted, again, I was very school focused at this point in time, right?
yeah,
Late 90s, early 2000s. But like I said, like for me, I grew up on Windows, right? Like Windows is what we learned on. Windows is where like
yeah,
remember typing class? That's still a thing, by the way.
yeah.
Like I learned to type on Windows computers. I came up on Windows. Max where when, like again, you're on the newspaper, team at school, right? You're using Publisher or Adobe, whatever, and you needed an Apple for that. Or you went into the library and all the computers were Apple or whatever. I think Apple, again, from an education standpoint, really saturated that part of it. And
Mhm.
we all can joke about the business strategy of getting to people while they're young so that as they grow up that like NFL fan here, the NFL is great at this, right? Like they're like, no, the kids club, this, that, and their goal is by the time that you have your own money, you're spending it on going to sporting events, right?
Right, right.
I mean, so Apple was smart because by the time these kids got to the point where they needed their own computers, a lot of them bought Apple computers.
Yeah. If they could afford it, but yeah.
Oh, that's fair.
Yeah. So it was so just to move forward a little more quickly. 2004, I was approached by a guy named Paul Dipple, and I don't know if anyone here knows Paul Dipple from the MSP world. It was 2004. He said there was a company that wanted to acquire my company. I was like, "What?" Like it was me and a couple techs, and I really didn't know what I was doing. Although I was doing fine because I didn't have enough people to really meet the demand, but I could have done better if I really knew, right? So I ended up joining or getting acquired by a company in 2005 that was, like 30 people. They acquired me, my small team, and my clients. And I spent a year there, 2005, and that's where I got introduced to managed services. Like they were on a peer group. They were really innovative in that aspect of seeing the MSP market. And they eventually got acquired by All Covered. So that's their story. But during that time, they said, we're going to go all in on MSP and we're not even interested in the Apple market anymore, which was what I was focused on. So I either needed to go all in on the Windows MSP market or start over. And I decided to start over. So
Mm.
2006, I decided I was going to be Apple focused MSP. Now, the challenge I had was there weren't really a lot of tools available for me to automate or manage things in 2006. Now we're in 2006 in the Apple world. And eventually I ran into a company called Jamf Software, who, if you're in the MSP business, you know that. So I was an early adopter. They were like 35 people at the time.
Mm.
Today they're a publicly traded company. And I spent the next, 2006 to 2015, 16, 17, building on that platform, building custom dashboards using their API, 100% retainer based from probably 2008 on. We were 100% retainer based. So
Wow.
very early adopter of MSP. However, I was always the outsider because I was Apple only, right?
For sure.
Yeah. And even I still kind of feel like an outsider because when I follow the publications and I talk to the teams and even, your podcast, like they don't always resonate with me because I don't hear a lot of mention of the Apple ecosystem. No,
Okay.
no dish on you, George. I'm just
I mean,
that's just
listen,
the that's just the industry is still leaning very heavily on Windows.
I mean, all right. I know there's probably more to the story, but let me pause for 10
Yeah,
seconds.
yeah,
In my opinion, and I'm sure you have one, but let me throw mine out there.
yeah, yeah.
Apple won the mobility war.
Hmm.
Like, as a Windows
Yeah,
guy, as a Microsoft guy, every a tablet, cell phone, pods, watch, all Apple, like without hesitation. But all of my actual get work done things are all Microsoft.
yeah, yeah,
So, like, I think that they crushed that compared to the other options out there for sure, current day. And I used to have Microsoft phones, right? Like Switchvox and
yeah,
all
yeah,
sorts of whatever. And they were cool devices and like the ones with the slide out keyboards and this and that and like HTC, this, that, and the other. But like the iPhone and the iPad and the iPods and the watch and like all of that ecosystem, I think they just won point blank. Like,
yeah, yeah,
but I never owned an iMac. I never owned a Mac Mini. I never owned a laptop. Like I could. By the way, I could fix them, right? Like when some. I love the people who were like thought they were Mac gurus. Like you're a Mac guru, but people who like kind of faux Mac guru, and then like I would come in as somebody doing technical support, and they'd be like, "You can't fix this," because I couldn't figure it out. I was like, "Oh, let me try."
yeah.
Oh, here it is. They're like, how'd you do that? And I was like, well, yeah, I'm just good at fixing problems. I don't care what it is, right?
Right,
So
right.
I
Well,
digress.
that's a
But go
great
ahead.
attitude. That's a great attitude to have because then that's the attitude that's is often missing as people transition from Windows only to Windows and Apple is too many of those techs think they can't problem solve on the Apple side, which problem solving is really no different, right? You go through a process. What's the problem? Let's get to the root cause. Let's figure out what we can do next and forget the platform. So, um,
So let me take your opinion. Do you agree on the mobility war? Like, can we like? I guess it's Apple. I mean, Microsoft killed their mobility product, and then there's
yeah.
every flavor of Android out there. They're like, I would assume your opinion is Apple won that, but what is it?
No, no, I mean I hear what you're saying and definitely agree. Like the iPhone is everywhere, right? Everywhere. Um, I still think MSPs and even internal IT sometimes struggles to understand what to do with that device and how to
Oh
protect it
no,
and
no.
manage it.
Oh no, I was just talking about generally speaking. We'll get
Oh
to the
yeah, yeah.
MSP side.
Generally speaking, for sure. Um, and in fact, where was I going with that?
You were you
So
were you were saying like you were like 2006. We're moving forward
yeah,
to
yeah. Well, I
one,
was
and
going to
you're
add, it was around probably 2012 or so where I needed to, in my own business, get like this move from you remember we used to host email inside the house,
yes.
then we put it in the cloud, but it was just kind of a co-location service.
I mean,
And
it was
I'm like,
around that 2006, 2010, 2011 time frame where everybody was. I mean, it obviously went further than that, but like
yeah,
in my mind, I'm thinking before Office 365, it used to be
yeah.
called Microsoft BPOS, Business Productivity Suite.
Oh,
Like the
okay. Yeah,
early days of that, right? Like it eventually grew into 365, but like that was their
yeah,
marketed name of it. And then like you still had all the different mail servers, right? Whether it was
yeah,
small business server with Exchange, whether it was, the IMAP, whether it was, whatever, like everybody had a different flavoring of your own box in the closet.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so it would have been around the introduction of 365 that I did an audit of all of our customers and said, are they on Google or are they on Microsoft?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And overwhelmingly, they were on Microsoft. So that's where I put my company. I put it on 365. So we're 100% Apple, but we're running the Microsoft infrastructure as our, as our back end, so to speak. And I'm still surprised how many people don't understand that that's possible today. Like, I hear that, like, oh, you're an Apple guy. You must not like Microsoft. It's like, well, no, I totally embrace Microsoft. Their tools are great. I use them on the iPhone, use them on the Mac, use them in the cloud, so have no problems with Microsoft. But just to fast forward and to wrap up this story so we can get to some real conversations. In 2020, a friend of mine said, "Hey, our I just got acquired. His MSP got acquired by a much larger MSP. He's like, they want to build an Apple program or acquire one. I thought of you. You should talk to them." I'm like, "Yeah, after my 2005 experience, I'm not sure I want to do that." But I was struggling because I was trying to help what I perceived as a lot of IT teams focused on Windows, help them make the move to Apple, but I still wasn't really getting any traction. So I liked what I heard, and I thought, well, if I can be embedded in a much more Windows focused organization, much larger than mine, maybe I can figure out what's going on here. What's the roadblock? And when I say much larger, I was between 1.5 and 2 million in revenue, so small MSP. They were on their way to 100 million,
Wow.
now 200 million. So they're growing like crazy. And I
That's a
got I
whole different animal.
yeah, whole different animal. But the problems are really very similar. They just have more zeros, right?
Mhm.
They have more zeros, but other than that, very similar. And so it was both enlightening and frustrating and a fantastic experience. And I spent 2 years integrating my Apple team into their Windows team and learning how that worked. And then took some time off. That's when Adigy contacted me and said, could you help us talk to our MSP market? Spent almost 2 years there, and then just last week decided to go off and get back into consulting and helping people, helping business owners and MSPs with the Apple platform.
Hmm.
So that's my current focus
That
today.
is a very intriguing journey. It has a lot of MSP in there, which is great because, like, I know when I
Yeah.
talk to a lot of people, they didn't get into MSP until like more recently in their career, but
Mhm.
you've really been through the heyday of this, which is awesome. So let's talk about current day then, right? Because like
Yeah.
Apple and has come out with their own management suite of things, right? So like obviously there are other companies like Jamf you mentioned, like Adigy you
Mhm.
mentioned that I think MSPs who have probably heard those names and are using
Right.
some of those maybe. Um, there's still the struggle of the mobility, right? Because the iMac and the actual desktop laptop versus the mobile app operating system ecosystem is different still.
Yeah.
Um, I think in 2025, the Apple and Mac machines are way more popular than they were in 2015.
Hmm.
So there's way more of them out there. But I'm not sure the MSP industry, the sandbox I like to call it, has really matured in how they handle those. They're still kind of the exception to everything else that they're doing. They deal with it, not really manage it. Like they're waiting for you to
Yeah.
raise your hand, and then they'll go and try and fix something, but there's not really a management part of that. And is it easier? Is there a clearer path today in 25 than there was in 2015? Because I would say if I asked any 10 MSPs that I walked into, 9 out of 10 with them would say no.
Hmm. Yeah.
What's the answer?
Yeah, well, you hit it on the head when you said maturity, because I think what's happened is a lot of these MSPs, and they are very mature MSPs on the Windows side of the house, but they've forgotten what it took to get there. So when they try to apply those concepts to the Apple side of the house, where they're very immature,
Yeah.
they get frustrated because they're like, we're a mature MSP. We should just be able to do this. Like, well, you got to kind of step back, rethink, think differently, think the Apple way, forget the Windows way, and embrace the Apple ecosystem. And then it's easy, but it's
Hmm.
going to continue to be hard if you continue to keep your Windows mindset and just slap an Apple name on your website and say, we do Apple because we got this Mac guy that we hired. He says he has a Mac at home or an Apple at home, and he's our go-to.
Well,
So I
I,
think what I've
I,
seen.
I feel
Oh,
like
sorry, Joe.
but I
Yeah,
feel like the reason that is because there's a lot of products, right? I mentioned
yeah,
Jamf, I mentioned Adigy, I mentioned the Apple Business Management, whatever they call it now. There's
yeah.
other products out there. There's Intune, there's Lighthouse, there's, other tools out there. Here's the problem. when it comes to Apple and Mac, it just seemed up until the late 2010s, it was very limited, right? Like they
Mhm.
could tell you from an inventory standpoint what's out there, but could it do anything? Like the
Yeah.
answer was usually no. So like has the parity from a management standpoint from a Microsoft Apple like in 2025 is that like here now or is it still the perception is this, but what's the reality?
Right, right. I think the reality, and I mean, this may not be a popular one with the audience, but the reality is that Apple has really surpassed what can be done, surpassed Windows, what can be done on the device.
Bold statement.
Yeah. And I saw this when not just when I was acquired, but in various MSPs. Today, I was just talking to somebody who said we had to scale back our Apple management to match our Windows. We had to
Scale
scale it back.
back.
Yeah, scale it back.
Okay. I'm even more bold statement.
So, just a quick story. I remember being in a client meeting and I'm presenting the Apple solution, and this goes back several years. Um, Automated device enrollment, which means zero touch, meaning you buy a device, it gets shipped, during the pandemic, especially, it gets shipped anywhere you want.
Mm-hmm.
The end user unboxes it, it's automatically managed, encrypted, configured, ready to use and support. And the client loved it. They said, this is what we need, this is what we want. We want it on all of our Apple devices, and we want it on Windows. Well, I'm not the Windows guy, so I can't answer that question. So I'm waiting for the Windows teammate to chime in and say, yeah, we can do that. But it's a very awkward conversation. It's not quite clear if we can do it or not. And we get off the phone and we debrief, and I'm like, what's the problem? Well, what is it? Autopilot?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, we haven't really done autopilot yet.
Mm.
And if we do autopilot, we're going to need some more licensing. We're going to need to do this. We're going to need to do that. And it's like, guys, you've been telling me that my system is antiquated and expensive, and now here we are, like apples to apples features, and you can't even deliver what I'm delivering on the Apple side. Or if you can, you're telling me it's going to cost more than my licensing cost. So that was to me a very eye-opening experience, and you would think that would be the end of the discussion, but the challenge is and I heard this was shared by me recently, and I like it. It's called corporate folklore. The corporate folklore is so strong in these organizations that when they hear that story, they tell themselves, well, that doesn't really match with what I understand to be true on the Apple side. So that just must be something one-off or weird or something Ben made up. I'm not sure I believe that because I haven't seen it with my own eyes. Do you, and to double down on that, there's a huge culture shift that needs to happen. If you're a Windows focused MSP and you've been focused on Windows for the past 10, 20 years, what do you think the messaging has been to your audience about Apple over those past 20 years?
I
Has it
mean,
been
I
positive?
personally and as a professionally, personally, Apple is the premium, more polished, more hip ecosystem of products. And if my kid's using it and it's wait in line every time a new device comes out because everybody wants it, then there must be some fire to where the smoke is.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what I'm getting at is what I found is even those MSPs that want to change, they're like, hey, we want to open up markets, we want to pick up Apple devices. We know they're out there, or we've lost an opportunity because we said we didn't do Apple. They often struggle to make that transition because they have spoken internally and to prospects and customers that they don't do Apple, they don't care about Apple, they
Sure.
don't know Apple.
But
And
let me
so,
pause you right there. Here's what
yeah,
usually happens, Ben, and
yeah,
feel free to challenge me here. Usually it's the check signer, owner, business decision maker that shows up and says, "Here, make this work," and it's an Apple,
Uh, right, right.
right?
Yeah.
Like the rank and file is getting the cheap, Black Friday computer. It's the owner who's showing up with their Apple device saying, "Make this work." Am I wrong?
No, no, that's often how it starts, either in the creative teams or the C level. Yeah, for sure.
And then what are they going to say? No.
Right.
No, of course they got to bend over backwards. But then usually what happens after that is I have no clue what to do here.
Yeah.
I'm just going to do the bare minimum to get it working. But like from a remote management, provisioning, monitoring, all of that stuff, zero.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where getting back to what an MSP is all about, which is standards, process, procedure, and maturity, they have that all working on the Windows side. What
Hmm.
they don't typically have are those standards on the Apple side. So it's the Wild West. They're like, well, the client, well, whatever they're doing, we'll just keep doing it. Or they're not doing anything. We're not really doing anything. We'll just help them if we need to or can, or, there's no structure. And so my push is build that structure, build that process. Obviously, that's also what I'm trying to help MSPs do. And that's also, one of the reasons I shifted my back end from Jamf to Adigy is because I was scaling and I needed more MSP friendly integrations. And that's where Adigy, excels. Jamf was great when I used it. They were pre-cloud. So
Mm.
I think they've struggled to not to bash them, but to make that transition. Whereas Adigy was built on the cloud and built MSP first. So I think that's a fantastic tool for any MSP to investigate if you need some place to start building that process.
So it's
Not to
really interesting.
say, what's that?
I was going to say it's really interesting. There's this realistic, you know, splitting of the Red Sea scenario here, right? Like
Mhm.
I subscribe to a platform to do my Windows or to do my Microsoft or to do whatever. And let's face it, I mean, I can tell you my visibility of the marketing through my journey was it can do everything. It can make your coffee, it can sharpen your knives. Like you don't need anything else. And then like you actually got into it, you found out that it's not true. You needed to bolt this on and bolt that on. But at the end of the day, I today have still not seen a single platform that does mobility, Apple, Microsoft, cloud, all together. It just, to me, doesn't
Right,
exist.
right. You're talking about a single, like all-in-one printer solution that does everything.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Like, so from
Yeah.
an MSP standpoint, like, I have to make a legitimate investment in a second platform if I'm
Yeah.
going to handle Mac and Apple machines.
Yeah. And I agree with that. And I think you want to do that. You want a best of breed system for each platform. And I know that's counterintuitive to the like, let's do it all in one. But I also think it's finding that balance, right?
Mm.
Like you don't always want everything in one box because how resilient are you if something goes down and breaks? You want to have some level of flexibility, but you don't want to go so far that you're managing multiple mobile device management systems, which is what I see, especially on the Apple side. I see MSPs doing that because they allow their client to bring whatever they have, which they would never allow on the Windows side. They would never say, "Oh, you're using Kaseya, they're using ConnectWise." Well, it doesn't matter. We support them all, but that's what they do on the Apple side.
So let me ask you this then, and I
Yeah.
think it's a legitimate situation, but today MSP has a legitimate question to ask. Do I subscribe to pick your favorite vendor versus Microsoft's Intune?
Hmm.
Or do I go to the Apple device business management tools versus
Yeah.
Attitude?
Yeah.
What is Apple offering directly today that people may not realize that would be akin to Microsoft's Intune platform?
Yeah. Good question. So, Apple offers Apple Business Manager, which is free for everyone and is really client
Free.
focused, although it needs an MDM to work.
Oh.
So, Apple does have Apple Business Essentials, which is their entry level, let's call it MDM tool that works with and is built into Apple Business Manager.
Mm.
However, it's only available in the US.
Hmm.
It's very limited. And I it's not built for MSPs, right? It's
Mm.
like if you want to do it, if you're a small company of 10 people and you do all your IT alone on your own, do it yourself, it's probably a fine solution.
Hmm.
But as you scale and as you get more people involved and as you maybe outsource to MSP, let the MSP decide what tool they use. And yeah, there's Adigy, Jamf, Kanji on the Apple Focus side. There's Intune, which, I know Microsoft uses. It's an adequate tool, but it's still limited. And I think the challenge there is you have your Intune admins who don't know Apple very well, and you've got your Apple admins who don't know Intune very well. So if you're one of those people who knows both really, really well, and you like both really well, I have
You're a
not met you
unicorn.
yet.
Yeah, you're a unicorn, mythical creature.
Yeah. So what tends to happen is either the Intune team gets frustrated because they're trying to manage Macs that they don't understand in Intune, or the Apple team gets frustrated because they're told you have to use Intune and they don't, have the expertise. So that's where, again, I do love Adigy. They have integrations with Intune. I would argue that your best of both worlds is if you use Intune to attach Adigy to it through the integrations and use Adigy on your Apple side and Intune on your Windows side, but you're still getting Intune information across both platforms. So,
Interesting.
um,
So can, back to the Apple Business Management, which apparently starts off as free. The
yeah,
Essentials limited, right? But like, is there a paid for option that does more? And is it worth investigating into?
not from Apple. No.
Okay.
So it's just Apple Business Essentials. And Apple Business Essentials, as the name implies, are the essentials,
Mhm.
which means not a lot. It's also more complicated because it's paired with iCloud storage, which, from a
Mm.
business perspective, not a lot of people use iCloud, let's be
I agree.
honest.
I agree.
And it's also paired with their expanded Apple Care service, which, warranty, okay, it's nice peace of mind to know that if I drop my iPhone or something happens to my MacBook Pro, maybe I can take advantage of that. But it still feels a little like, do I really need that bundled into my device management service? So
Fair.
I'm not sure where Apple's going with that. And if
Hmm.
we want to bash Apple just a little bit, I still don't understand why they don't participate in the MSP channel
It's a good question.
because I feel like they could make things a lot easier and make people feel a lot more comfortable if they just took a step in that direction.
Mhm.
Am I wrong on that?
I mean, listen, it took Microsoft a long time on their own right to even acknowledge an MSP exists or even
Mhm.
start building feature set for that particular grouping. I would say today, a lot of people say they've made major steps. I'm not sure I agree. I think they've made baby steps. And
Yeah,
like, I guess for Microsoft being as big as they are, that's something. And it's
right.
not great, in my opinion, but it's something. Where I agree with you on the Apple side, I don't think they acknowledge it, nor have they done anything past the acknowledgement from a business product standpoint. I think, gone are the days of the Apple server infrastructure. I think they've since kind of gone away from there, but
Yeah,
I do believe that Apple as a endpoint maker, that is their business focus for sure.
right.
And I think that they are the premium flashy version of that, like I said before. And I think that that's not going away, to be honest. I think that the Microsoft based competitor devices to that, like even Microsoft's on Surface line, has tried to up their profile to get there. Many
Mm,
people would say they've fallen short of getting to a premium ish place.
mm,
All of that being said, if Microsoft is dominating the SaaS part of this conversation, the services apps part of it, Although one could argue from the App Store standpoint, Microsoft or Apple's App Store is king, right? Like
Mm,
they're,
yeah,
both on the mobile and non-mobile side, Apple's App Store I think is unparalleled. But from a business standpoint, which is what this conversation from an MSP standpoint revolves around, I would say 365 has definitely dominated, and the Azure
yeah,
and ancillary things that come with that from a business standpoint has absolutely dominated that conversation.
yeah. Well, and Microsoft is in the Apple App Store, right? The
Right?
suite of apps. Yeah. So
Can't
if you have
guess they got
Apple,
along.
yeah, they finally got along. So if you have Apple Business Manager and you have an MDM and you have zero touch enrollment or automated device enrollment, which leads to zero touch, basically you could deploy the Microsoft suite to your devices, out of the box.
Mm,
So
sounds
there is
that
a
sounds good.
business. What's that?
So that sounds really good to me. And by the way,
Yeah.
and this just shows you that, I didn't keep up with all of it. I had no idea that that whole zero touch experience existed on the Apple side, the way that you just laid it out up until this conversation.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, yeah. And that, I mean, that's the challenge. There's so much that happens in the technology world today on all, not just Microsoft and Apple, but beyond AI and everything else. Like, how do you keep up with all of it?
That
So,
is that is a ever challenging problem for all, right? Because
yeah.
like, I always say, I love living on the bleeding edge. As I've grown up in the industry and I've realized that I love cool stuff. It feels like a toy store. I'm always learning new things and opening up new things, and that's really like a cool part of being in this, kind of, sandbox, if you would. Um, as somebody on the business side of it, consistently reproducible outcomes and results is so important.
Hmm.
And I find that when you don't start from that outcome and work backwards, you get a very, very discombobulated um, journey. And quite
Yeah.
frankly, that is not good. Not from the end user's perspective, not from the MSP managing their technology perspective, and ultimately from a I'm in business to ultimately make money, I'm not working for free. That usually doesn't end well either.
Yeah. Yeah, because you get distracted, right? There's so either you get distracted or your customer gets distracted by all these other things. And if you don't have a plan and a strategy in place, it's too easy to either jump platforms before you give it a chance or get distracted by the next shiny object. So yeah, it's a real
No,
thing.
that's fair. So like since you've been doing this from the late 90s till now, if you were to, I'm going to just put my finger in the air here. What percentage of MSPs from the 2000s, like until now, I hope there's a change, but like in today in 2025, what percentage of MSPs do you think, if you had to make a educated guess, have formally adopted an Apple practice from a management, deployment, automation, all of that? Like,
Yeah.
is it has it broken 10%? Like,
That's that's a good question. I was gonna generously maybe say 20% and then scale that back, but you said 10%, so
I don't know. I'm
I
just
think
throwing a number out there. I
no,
don't know what
I
it
think
is.
you're right. It's still overwhelmingly leaning Microsoft, and I think there's an opportunity for every MSP out there who is only focused on Microsoft to either make that decision, just like I did back in the day, should I go Google or Microsoft? You either decide we're going to be Windows only, and we're going to partner with an Apple expert, or we're going to do both and we need to get serious about it. But if you remain wishy-washy and you don't decide what your strategy is, then you're just going to fade off into the sunset because these other MSPs, even though they're small, they're focused. We do Windows well and we do Apple well. Or we do Windows well and we partner with an Apple team that does Apple really well.
All right, so let me pause. There's SOC vendors to partner with. There's outside help desk vendors to partner with.
Yeah.
There's cloud focused consultancies to partner with. maybe I just haven't paid attention nor have gone looking for it. Is there an MSP version of a outsourced partnership for Apple support?
I believe there is, and in fact, that's something that I was trying to build, in 2017, 18, 19. The challenges I ran into is there was still this like cultural mismatch,
Mm,
and I was getting MSPs coming to me, talking to me, saying, "Oh yeah, I would like to outsource my Apple to you." And
mm.
guess what? I want to pay you, I'll just make up these numbers, $5 a Mac per month, and I'll just send you everything. And I'm like,
For
$5?
$5.
I'm
Yeah.
charging my clients 150. Like,
Yeah.
what? I think I need a little more money than that. And we couldn't find that sweet spot because there's this huge, I think, difference between how the Windows MSPs view the license and the box that they're supporting versus the Apple view, which is I'm supporting the business, the person, and yeah, they happen to use technology. It happens to be Apple, and I think those that are willing and open to find those relationships will really prosper. But you're not going to do it by beating up an Apple provider on price. And just to flip it around, I was outsourcing my Windows side of the house, which was very small, to a Windows team, and I was paying a premium for that because
Mm,
that wasn't my business. And I wanted to make some money, but it wasn't my primary revenue generator. I
right.
wanted the problem to go away. I paid a premium for that service. It's just I didn't find people willing to do that in reverse, pay me a premium for my Apple expertise, at
Hmm.
least in those days. And I think all of that is kind of shifting and changing, and the pandemic has accelerated a lot of this, and us all working remotely. Um, so
I,
I think they're out there. I could introduce you to some that are doing it today,
hmm.
the looking to support Windows MSPs, but they're Apple focused. Um,
I mean, listen, I know there's definitely like, to your point, totally Apple MSPs. I've met them. They're out there. There's even they're their own little pocket universe in the MSP land. Like they talk to each other. They're a community
yeah,
themselves. I'm sure you probably knew that way before I did. That being said, it makes perfect sense to me as someone who has run an MSP for a really long time. Why would I build my own SOC solution when it's way more affordable to outsource to a company who just does that?
right,
I know some MSPs have decided to do it on their own and they had the infrastructure and the revenue to make it make sense. For the average MSP, for the majority of them, that is not a reality, right? To this point, why would I spend, if I know what my burden rate is for an hour of somebody's time on my team, why would I take 3x more of their time to solve the same problem when I could just make it somebody else's problem, know what my cost is,
yeah,
and route
yeah,
it to them? And by the way, net better experience for my customer because they get their
yeah.
problem fixed way faster. Net better experience for my staff member because they're not struggling to figure it out. Oh, and by the way, probably more profitable for me as the guy signing the checks because I don't have to worry about whether I'm burning time or not.
Right.
I don't see how that's a losing situation. But the $5 thing, like, I don't know what I would have bought at $5 for anything in the MSP business. That's like it is a one component in a stack of components, like an application
Yeah.
maybe, but like somebody's actual time. What is $5? I don't understand where that number
Yeah,
came.
maybe I exaggerated the five
Yeah,
dollars, but you get
yeah.
my point. And I think maybe you're smarter than most, George. You see that yes, outsourcing would be the right thing to do. But I think it's just again that because it hasn't been done before or people haven't seen it done before, they need a good example and to
Sure.
feel comfortable with it, and then they can embrace it. So I would encourage the audience here, if you're not doing Apple today or not doing it well, to
Not doing it
consider
well.
finding a partner or reach out to me. I can help you find a partner. And yeah, if you get to a point where you're like, well, now we feel confident, we should bring this in-house or build it ourselves or whatever. I mean, that still seems like a smarter way to go than to just continuing to ignore the Apple platform and dealing with those issues that you talked about, which is you're wasting time, you're wasting money, and you're probably ignoring the problem, which is you don't really want to know how much time and money you're wasting on Apple. And if you did, that would feed your frustration of this is why I don't like Apple. But at the end of the day, if you said, what is my strategy? How am I going to deal with this? What's my process? Just like you do on the Windows side, it's going to be so much better and easier. And that process may be doing it in-house or maybe outsourcing it.
So,
Uh,
so you had made a comment earlier where you said I had to pare my functionality back to match Windows. Where's that gap though? Like, what are the additional things that you could do on the Apple side that Microsoft's still behind on?
Yeah, well, I think two things. One is the zero touch. Not to say Microsoft's behind. I know they have a solution for it. I just don't see a lot of MSPs adopting it.
Mm,
And just as an example, and we were doing this pre-pandemic,
mm,
we got to a point where we incentivized clients financially. We said, if you do the zero touch workflow, because that's easier for everyone, that's included in the service that we offer you.
mm,
But if you don't, if you deviate from that in any way, because even if you set it up, clients can still deviate, right? They can buy from a location that's not authorized, which means you're not going to get the zero touch. If they do that and they need you to set up their computer, that's a fee.
mm.
That's a fee that they pay. And the clients understood that. There was communication that was required. You know, that maybe the first time it happened, we'd let it slide, but we'd educate them. But eventually, yeah, zero touch meant it was included and everyone loved that. Anything else, it was like an overnight delivery, you know, it required an extra fee. And I think that's some of the tweaking that needs to happen to make some of these adjustments because the client doesn't know. They don't really understand what that means when you tell them. So they're like,
So,
why would I do that?
so just to be clear for
Yeah.
people in our chair that have no idea, like when you say when you buy in this lane, you get the zero touch capability, but if you buy in that lane, you don't. What does that mean in plain English?
Yeah. Yeah. What that means is the only way for zero touch, whether I assume on the Windows side or the Apple side, will work is if you buy through a trusted process so that the device knows that it's been purchased and connected to the organization.
I see.
But if I'm a small business owner and I see that Best Buy has a MacBook Air on sale and I just go buy it, there's no way that Best Buy, Apple, you, or me know that that device is attached to that organization. So it's never going to be automatically
All right, but
enrolled,
what about
secured.
just, hey, my 2 years is up. I'm going to the AT&T store to buy the next thing. Like, what about that?
Again, probably not unless you have a business account with AT&T, and that's where you buy all of your phones. And therefore, if there's maybe no way for them to mess that up in that scenario, but they probably could still mess it up. So that's something to be aware of. And that's something else. People, you know, when they see that not work for one reason or another, they discount it. But I'm like, that's, you know, perfection is your goal. Automation is your goal.
Hmm.
You don't always achieve it. You have to have a plan B. You have to have an alternative. But I would say we had very high adoption of zero touch deployments when we incentivized the customers to work that way. And when we explained it to them, we didn't just, you know, say we're going to charge you. You know, we explained why this was a good thing for everybody. And that is one of my soapboxes I get on is communication. I think MSPs have been focused on technology for so long. Some of them have forgotten what it requires to communicate with a customer. And on the flip side, we all have customers who don't communicate with us, right?
Hell
And
yeah.
they're also at fault. And maybe we should find customers that will communicate with us.
It just to me, what it sounds like is it's a very similar story, just in a different flavor, right? Like I
Yeah,
would tell my Windows, buyer, do not go to Best Buy, Costco, whatever, right? Like don't Black
right.
Friday me, man. Don't do it. If you make me handle it, I'll do it, but I'm charging you a pain in the ass tax because I should not have to spend time on this rather than it comes out of the box
Yeah,
ready to go. 100% with you. I don't care. Like it seems like that's very similar in that way.
exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
the hey, I got the offer in the mail and Verizon's offering me a special to convert my phone if
Yeah.
I switch like that happens every day.
Yeah.
Like on the mobility side, right? Like,
Stay away from the carriers.
That happens all the time.
Yeah.
Um, so the zero touch, awesome. So basically you're saying it like it's there, it's been there for a long time, and if you don't know it's there, you're missing the boat.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So what about the remote? Like, wasn't there for a long time like Apple locked down their operating system so that you couldn't remotely like manage those devices? Like, is that not the case now?
That's not the case. I think what you probably heard was that they put some security in place that prevented a lot of the old software from working, so it broke. But if
Mm.
you were using any of the Apple focus tools, Adigy, I mean, Adigy can help you remote screen share with an iPhone or an iPad if you want.
Mm.
So it doesn't have to
Like
be just a
without
Mac.
them pressing a button?
Well, on the iPhone and iPad, they do have to initiate. You have to say, share my screen,
I
for
see.
security reasons. And I would push for that on the Mac side as well, although I think there is unassisted remote options on the Mac side for sure. But
So you literally, so they initiate a session through an app, I assume, or a web
yeah.
page. They press go, and then you can literally move around their mobile device screen like you would anything else.
On the Mac side, yes. On the iOS and iPhone, I think it's view only, and you can just say, click here, click there.
Got
Now
it.
that is an Apple restriction.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. I'm just curious. Like I
Yeah,
didn't know
yeah.
what the limitation was. And then like what about like I know some people just set it to auto, but like device updates, app updates, operating system updates, like they come out pretty regularly, right? I see zero
Yeah.
stuff today on the Apple too. Like gone is the day of, oh, Apple never has a problem. I don't think that, by the way, I think that was one of those lore things, by the way. Like Apple
Yeah,
got
yeah.
viruses too, no?
Right, right, right. Um, yes, Apple. In fact, Apple has something. They've always had mobile device management, MDM. They now have declarative device management,
Hmm,
which is the modern version of MDM, and that's how they're doing their OS updates now. So if you want the most advanced OS updates, you need to be on declarative device management, DDM, which is also something else Adigy supports. So.
interesting.
And
So
that's
like,
on all the Apple devices.
is there a like, do you know how Microsoft has like home, business, and then like enterprise, right? Like, does that exist in Apple? Like, is there a separation like that?
As far as hardware or software?
No, like software, the operating system.
Yeah. I don't think so. And in fact, this is a little more hardware, but the MacBook Air, just as an example, that's an entry level machine that I used to tell my clients to avoid because it was underpowered.
Hmm.
Today, it's fantastic. And that
Mm.
goes back to the corporate folklore, even for myself. MacBook Airs, M4, Apple Silicon chip, AI ready, $999, last all of Apple stuff lasts a good 3, 4 years. I've seen people push it to 5 years and still get a trade-in value at the end of that.
Mm.
So that's something else to reconsider. Like these devices are more affordable than ever. And Apple has definitely blurred the lines between consumer and prosumer and professional. Obviously, you can spend a lot of money on a Mac and get a really high-end video editing machine, but you can also spend $999 and get a super powerful business machine that runs Office. You know?
It's interesting. I think once they started using their own chips, right, started building their own processors, like kind of leveled up a little bit on the juice that you get
Yeah,
for what
yeah,
you're spending, right?
yeah, and the battery life. Yeah.
Ah, the battery life. They've always been better at that.
Mhm.
I often find anytime I see somebody say battery life, I go, oh, it's half of that. There's no way. There's no way. But Apple's always been good on the battery. Um, Wow, Ben, I'll be honest with you. In my MSP journey, and you know, it's coming to an end finally, but I exist in the pool that you have been talking about this whole time. Like I just dealt with it. I just twisted,
Yeah.
I just did what I had to do to get to the point where the person was happy. I never really had a good management thing. I never spent any time thinking about it. I had no clue that Apple was actually ahead of the game from what we know now as Microsoft's capabilities. I had no clue. And I'll be honest with you, I think, and to your point, I think the majority of the MSPs out there still don't have a clue.
Yeah, yeah. I never got to my second point. I don't know if we have time, but you
No, go
reminded me.
ahead.
So the second point around the difference is compliance.
Hmm.
So Apple, in cooperation with NIST, created a standard for compliance.
Okay.
And then companies like Adigy took advantage of that. And so today, deploying compliance across Apple devices is very much quick and easy compared to Windows. As an example, what I've heard, I haven't done it on Windows, it can take weeks, maybe months to deploy compliance across a fleet of Windows devices. But on the Apple side, because of this standard that's been built and the way it's deployed on platforms like Adigy, it can happen in days. And so that was specifically what I was told had to be scaled back. Like we can do all this stuff around compliance and also compliance tied into Microsoft conditional access. We can do all this on the Apple side, but on the Windows side, we're not quite there. So we had to tone down our Apple compliance to match our service offering.
Wow. Well, number one, Microsoft has not taken a declarative stance on what compliance is, right? Like they basically, it's like a Swiss Army knife, right? They're like, hey, you decide what you want to do, but yes, you can
Yeah.
go in here and start pressing buttons. So you're telling me Apple themselves have decided this is what compliance is.
They were involved in the conversation. I don't know exactly, but they have a website. I'll share it with you so I can put it in the show notes that
Go ahead.
talks about their work on compliance. And again, yeah, the standard, would you deploy the standard as it's written? Probably not. It's way too much. But you could very easily do it. You may lock down your machine so it doesn't do anything, but
Hmm.
so, that's a different issue. But the fact that
Wow.
you can deploy compliance, I think is a huge step forward because a lot of companies they don't even consider it. They don't think they can afford it or do it. It's totally affordable and doable on the Apple platform
But Apple's native capability or in conjunction with a third party
in
component?
conjunction with an MDM.
Okay.
Yeah,
Like I feel like to your point, in order to get a Microsoft environment to a compliant environment, I'm multiple vendors in,
yeah,
right? Not Microsoft and one thing. I'm talking about seven things, 10
yeah,
things. And now all of a sudden it's vendor overload because I can't get it all in just one or two things.
right. Well, I think also what I heard you say is Microsoft doesn't have a clear stance.
They do
Uh,
not.
what is it?
Not in my opinion.
The UK has the Cyber Alliance,
Well, there's
Cyber
Cyber
Essentials,
Essentials, and
Cyber
then
Essentials. Okay,
they're kind of
so
ratcheting that up. Yeah.
yeah, so what I've heard, and again, I'm not the expert on this, but that framework is also kind of wishy-washy. It's
Mm.
like sort of do this. And so when I was working with MSPs at Adigy, they would say, "Hey, we want Adigy to support this." The problem is Adigy says, "Well, NIST in conjunction with Apple has a very clean, clear, black and white view on what this is. Cyber Essentials does not. So how are we supposed to implement
It's a good
something that's
question.
not black and white?" And so to your point, you do need that clarity in order to have something that you can iterate off of and work off of.
Well, I now let me go here since we're down this road. A little bit different, but in the same realm. The whole CrowdStrike thing is still not that long ago,
Mm, mm,
and there was a comparison done around that incident where they're like, well, this would have never happened on Apple devices because they don't let you do that. They lock the
mm,
kernel down so that you can't do that. And then there was like this, meeting of the minds where everybody in Microsoft had to get together to talk about, well, why, what, like it turned into a security conversation in the end, right? Like,
mm.
and then like, why did, is Microsoft going to lock this down? No, we're still not going to lock it down, but you need to take responsibility for what you're doing. And like, here's what this conversation turns into. And then like a cooperative statement came out between like, all these third party companies and Microsoft, where in the case of Apple, like they had just made this decision on their own, right? They're like, this is what it is. If you don't like it, don't come here.
Yeah,
Like you didn't see the whole world go down on all the Apple devices in one day, did you?
no.
So
I'm gonna put this in the chat.
sure.
It's the macOS Security Compliance Project,
Okay. I'll take a look
and
myself.
there's actually one for iOS and iPad OS as well. It's right there.
Awesome. Oh, poke into those. I had, like, by the way, had no clue that Apple had taken a definitive stance there. So, I mean, that kind of tells you that their positioning on that is it makes it a lot more understandable why their product is ready for it and
Mm,
you can get there quickly. And I guess that comes back to your comment of like, what's the difference between I had to scale back to, because the Microsoft side, like, they just didn't build it to be turnkey like that.
mm, hmm.
They made it so Swiss Army knife that there isn't one road.
Yeah, because they have a
So
whole channel of people out there doing all sorts of things for them.
it's interesting. Ben, how do people get, like you're out there again, you're in consultancy land, but like, hey, you know a lot more about MSPs focused on Apple. It seems like you're could be a really good resource if somebody wants to talk about making a declarative, I'm going to build an Apple component to my MSP for real, or maybe it's the other way. I need to find somebody that I can rely on to do this because our MSP is not good at it. How do they find you?
Yeah, well, definitely. I'm on LinkedIn, so look me up on LinkedIn. And then my website is rethinktech.club. And I have a Substack newsletter that you can join the club and follow along there and reach out to me if you want to learn more about what I call the Apple Advantage program, where I help you spin up an Apple program, uh, faster than you could on your own for sure.
Love it. There is a resource here. Isn't there? I ran into a guy, by the way, that runs a Apple focused like MSP event. I think it's called ACES. Is that?
Yeah, yeah, Justin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think he does that every year, right?
Yeah, he does. Yeah, that's a great one. He just had that this past week, last week.
Awesome.
Maybe now, maybe today.
Yeah. Well, you know what? That just goes to show you there's a subsection of MSP land that's Apple people.
Yeah, where'd you run into Justin?
I know I was doing obviously the MSP, community is broken up into neighborhoods like any city, right?
Yeah.
And so I've known Eric Anthony for a long time. I know those guys work together on that Facebook, platform, right? The group that they run together and they do like sessions like this, whatever.
Hmm.
So I kind of ran into him through there. And then I didn't, kind of put, he kind of made it clear, like, oh yeah, by the way, I do this, and I was like, oh, I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah.
So it just goes to show you that, over time, this has grown into a practice. The comment we made earlier, like, what percentage of MSPs have actually gone down this road? Not,
Yeah.
I don't think the majority by any.
Right. No. For sure, for sure. Well, thank you very much, George. I appreciate you having me on. Enjoyed the conversation. Great to meet you.
You got it, Ben. Thanks for coming on today, guys. This session was absolutely recorded. Hopefully, we taught you a few things. We'll post these links that Ben put in here on the Apple compliance and stuff. And you'll see this on mspinitiative.com, our YouTube page, our podcatcher. Keep checking back, and Ben, hopefully, we'll run into you in person somewhere.
Sounds great. Thanks, George.
You got
Bye.
it. Take it easy, guys.